Family helps family, not thinks about money, Grandpa said, handing me the mop. Every Saturday morning, my phone would buzz with the same text, be here by 8. Bring gloves. I'd drag myself out of bed, throw on old jeans and a faded t-shirt and drive 40 minutes to Grandpa's sprawling 2-story house on the edge of town. It wasn't some crumbling shack, he kept it pristine, with a manicured lawn and flower beds bursting with color. The place screamed retired guy with too much time and money, but somehow every weekend it was my job to keep it that way. No pay, no thanks, just a nod when I was done and a see you next week. I was 15 when it started. At first, I didn't mind too much. I'd show up, mop the hardwood floors until they gleamed, scrub the kitchen counters, and rake leaves in the fall. Grandpa would sit on his porch with a glass of iced tea, watching me like a hawk, pointing out spots I missed. You gotta learn responsibility, he'd say, as if my straight-A report card or my part-time gig bagging groceries didn't count. My friends were flipping burgers or babysitting, pocketing cash for gas or movie tickets. Me? I was sweating through my Saturdays for free because family duty. By 16, the resentment started creeping in. I'd spend 6 hours at his place mowing the lawn, washing windows, hauling trash to the curb while my friends posted Snapchats from the mall or the lake. I'd come home exhausted, my hands raw from scrubbing, only to hear my parents say, "It's good for you. Keeps you grounded." I tried to talk to them about maybe cutting back, but they'd shut me down. He's family. He needs you. Needed me? Grandpa was fitter than most guys half his age, hitting the gym daily and bragging about his iron health. He didn't need me. He just didn't want to pay for what I was doing. One day, I worked up the nerve to ask for a little cash, just enough for gas or a burger after. I was nervous, standing in his kitchen, my sneakers leaving faint dirt marks on the floor I just mopped. I mumbled something about how driving out every week was adding up. His face went red like I'd slapped him. Money? You think family charges family? He barked. He went on about how ungrateful I was, how he'd done so much for me, like letting me eat his leftovers sometimes. That night, he called my parents. By the time I got home, they were waiting, arms crossed. You hurt his feelings, Mom said. You need to apologize. I swallowed my pride, called him, and choked out a sorry. He grunted and said, be here Saturday. That's when I noticed the hypocrisy. Grandpa wasn't above hiring help. I'd see a landscaping crew roll up every few weeks to trim hedges or fertilize the lawn, jobs he deemed too big for me. A cleaning service came monthly to deep clean carpets or polish the chandelier in his dining room. But the grunt work? That was mine. He'd smile at neighbors, waving from his porch while I pushed the mower, saying stuff like, gotta teach the kid hard work. They'd nod approvingly, thinking he was some wise mentor. I wanted to scream, he's just cheap. The years blurred together, each weekend a repeat of the last. I'd zone out while vacuuming, dreaming of the day I could say no. My friends started saving for college, buying used cars, or taking road trips. I had nothing but calluses and a growing knot in my chest. I started stashing snacks in my backpack because Grandpa stopped offering lunch, claiming it was character building to work through hunger. I'd eat granola bars in his garage, hiding so he wouldn't lecture me. When I turned 18, everything shifted. I was an adult, legally free to make my own choices. One Friday night, I sat in my room, staring at my phone as his usual text came through. My heart pounded. I typed back, I can't come tomorrow. I need to focus on my own stuff. I hit send and waited. The reply came fast. You're abandoning family? After everything I've done? He called, but I let it go to voicemail. His message was a rant, how I was selfish, how I'd regret this, how he'd cut me out of his will. I cried myself to sleep, second-guessing everything. My parents were livid. They said I was disrespectful, that I owed Grandpa for all he'd given us. What exactly? I couldn't name a single thing beyond guilt trips. They grounded me even though I was 18 and told me to fix it. But I didn't. For the first time, I spent a Saturday sleeping in, then meeting friends at a diner. It felt like breathing after years underwater. I kept waiting for the guilt to crush me, but it didn't. I felt free. Update 1, a month later. A month after I stopped going, things got weird. Grandpa didn't call or text anymore, which was a relief, but also unsettling. My parents were still cold, dropping comments like, hope you're happy, breaking his heart. I tried to move on, picking up extra shifts at the grocery store and saving for community college. But then a neighbor I barely knew, someone who lived down Grandpa's street, saw me at the gas station and pulled me aside. She looked uncomfortable, shifting her weight. She said she'd overheard something at a block party and felt I should know. Apparently, Grandpa had been bragging to his buddies about how he'd trained me to do his chores for free. He'd laughed, saying I was too naive to ask for pay and how he'd saved thousands by keeping it in the family. My stomach churned. All those years I thought he was teaching me some grand lesson about duty. But to him I was just free labor. Worse, she mentioned he'd been cozying up to some woman nobody recognized, a friend who'd been visiting his house a lot. The neighbors thought it was odd since Grandpa always acted like a lone wolf. I didn't think much of it at first, just figured he was lonely. But it planted this uneasy seed in my mind. Who was she and why was he suddenly so secretive? I went home and tried to talk to my parents, hoping this neighbor's story would make them see my side. I laid it all out, how he'd bragged, how he'd used me. They just stared, then Dad said he's old. He says things he doesn't mean. Mom changed the subject. I felt like I was screaming into a void. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying every weekend, every lecture, every time he'd made me feel like I owed him my life. I started wondering what else he was hiding. Update 2, the betrayal deepens. A couple of months later, I got a thick envelope in the mail, addressed to me in Grandpa's handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a letter, short and cold, saying he was disappointed in my greed and that I'd learned the hard way about family. Tucked behind it were legal-looking papers, a copy of his will. I skimmed it, my heart sinking. Everything, his house, his savings, his vintage car collection, was going to some woman I'd never heard of. Not a penny to me, not even a mention of my parents or siblings. Just her. I felt like the air had been knocked out of me. All those years I told myself maybe he'd leave me something, a token, a keepsake, anything to show I wasn't invisible. But no. He planned to give it all to someone else. I called my aunt, his sister, hoping she'd know who this woman was. She sighed like she'd been dreading this. She said Grandpa had met this woman years ago at some charity event. She was his companion, someone he'd been seeing on and off. Aunt said she tried to warn him, but he was smitten, calling her the only one who gets me. Then Aunt dropped the real bomb. She'd overheard him once, years back, joking with this woman about me. He'd said he was dressing me, keeping me busy with chores so I'd stay loyal and not get ideas about his money. This woman had laughed, egging him on. They treated my life like a game, like I was some puppy he was training. I hung up, tears streaming down my face. I felt so stupid. I'd spent years thinking I was building a bond, earning his pride. But I was just a pawn. I didn't tell my parents about the will. I couldn't handle another round of his family. Instead, I threw myself into work, picking up every shift I could. I started noticing little things, like how Grandpa's old neighbors would give me sad looks when I ran into them, like they knew more than they let on. One even said, "You're better off away from that house." It made my skin crawl. What else didn't I know? Update 3, the unexpected turn. Fast forward 6 months. I was settling into college, making friends, and finally feeling like my life was my own. I'd pushed Grandpa to the back of my mind, though the hurt still lingered. Then one random afternoon I got a call from a number I didn't know. I almost ignored it, but something made me pick up. It was a lawyer. Grandpa had passed away suddenly, a heart attack while working out in his yard. I froze, not sure what to feel. Sadness? Relief? It was a jumble. The lawyer said I needed to come to settle some estate stuff. I didn't explain, just gave me an address. I showed up at his office, expecting to sign some paperwork or maybe claim a small keepsake. Instead, he handed me a sealed envelope with my name, written on it in unfamiliar handwriting, not Grandpa's. Inside was a letter from the woman he'd left everything to. My hands shook as I read it. She said she'd been with Grandpa for years, but she wasn't who he thought. She'd been playing him, skimming money, convincing him to rewrite his will in her favor. But after his death, she'd found a box of old photos, me as a kid, smiling with him at a county fair, me holding up a fish we'd caught. Something in her broke, she wrote. She felt guilty for how she'd used me as a joke to keep him hooked. As penance, she was giving me the house. Not the money, she'd already spent most of it, but the house was mine, clear of any debts. I sat there, the letter in my lap, stunned. The house I'd been slaved over for years, the symbol of all my resentment, was now mine. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The lawyer said it was legal, no strings attached. I drove to the house that night, stood in the driveway and just stared. The lawn was overgrown, the flowers were wilted. It didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a question. Final update, finding closure. It's been a year since I got the house. At first, I didn't know what to do with it. Part of me wanted to sell it, take the cash, and run, erase every memory of those weekends. But another part, the stubborn part, couldn't let go. I started fixing it up little by little. I'd mowed the lawn, repainted the porch, and planted new flowers. I didn't live there too many ghosts, but I'd visit, claiming it as my own terms. Then one last twist came out of nowhere. While cleaning out the attic, I found a locked box tucked under a pile of dusty quilts. I pried it open, expecting junk. Instead, it was full of letters Grandpa had written to my grandma who died before I was born. They were love letters, raw and honest, from when he was young and broke, promising her a better life. There was one photo, faded, of them laughing together, his arm around her waist. He looked happy. Human. Reading them I realized something I'd never seen before. Grandpa wasn't always been the gruff, calculating man I knew. He'd been someone else once, someone who'd loved fiercely, who'd dreamed big. Maybe losing Grandma had broken him, turned him into the guy who'd used me to feel in control. It didn't excuse what he'd done, but it made him less of a villain in my head. He was just a guy, flawed and hurting, like me. I didn't forgive him, not exactly. But I made a choice with it. I turned the house into a community space, a place for kids in the neighborhood to hang out after school, with games and books and snacks. It's not a charity, but it's something real, something that's mine. Every time I see kids laughing on that lawn, it feels like I'm rewriting those Saturdays, turning something painful into something good. The woman who'd left me the house? I never heard from her again. The money's gone, and so is she. I don't chase her down. I didn't need to. I've got my life now, college, friends, a future I'm building. And that house, with all its ghosts, isn't a prison anymore. It's just a place. My place.